The battlefield is seldom obvious. It does not always lie before you in clear sight. Instead, it lurks in the spaces between words, in the subtle shifts of tone, in the unspoken currents beneath every interaction. This is the terrain on which you must operate. Whether you face a colleague across a negotiation table, confront a long-standing personal grievance, or wrestle with the conflicting voices inside your own mind. Never enter blindly. To do so invites chaos. Because if you don't understand the background, you won't resolve the conflict. You will only add fuel to a fire you barely comprehend. Consider this. Every conflict, no matter how trivial or monumental, is rooted in a complex soil of context. This soil feeds the conflict's growth, shapes its form, and determines the possibilities for resolution. To engage effectively, you must first know the terrain. You must study it, map it, and understand it with precision. The wisdom of history's greatest strategists reinforces this truth. Sun Tzu, the ancient master of warfare, did not rush into battle without a deep and thorough knowledge of the landscape, the enemy's disposition, and the timing of engagement. His famous counsel still resonates. Know the enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles you will never be defeated. This knowledge extends beyond the enemy. It encompasses the entire context in which the conflict arises. You are not simply confronting an opponent or an issue. You are stepping into a dynamic system of relationships, histories, and expectations. You are entering a shifting environment where unseen forces may hold more power than the visible opposition. Take a moment. Reflect on your own experiences. How often have you found yourself engaged in conflict, only to realize afterward that you misunderstood the true nature of the dispute? Perhaps you missed the underlying fears driving the other party, or you overlooked critical cultural nuances. Maybe you were unaware of your own emotional state, clouding judgment and escalating tensions. This pattern is common. It is the trap that awaits anyone who fails to ground themselves in context before taking action. Because if you do not understand the background, your effort is like a soldier charging into a fog-shrouded valley, unaware of hidden trenches or ambush points. The outcome is rarely victory. More often, it is confusion, loss, and regret. You must master the art of context. This mastery is not a passive awareness, but an active, deliberate process. It demands curiosity, patience, and humility. It means suspending immediate reactions to ask, what are the conditions that have shaped this conflict? What unseen forces are at play? What histories inform the present moment? These questions are your reconnaissance. They prepare you for engagement. Without them, your strategy is built on sand. Conflict is inevitable. Life guarantees it. But the manner in which you confront it can make all the difference. You can be reckless, reacting impulsively to the surface symptoms. Or you can be strategic, grounded in a deep understanding of the terrain, moving with foresight and precision. Imagine a business negotiation. The stakes are high, the room tense. You are eager to push your agenda. But what if you pause to observe the subtle cues? The hesitations, the guarded expressions, the cultural references that hint at deeper values? What if you recognize that your counterpart's resistance is not mere obstinance, but rooted in past betrayals? What if you see that your own impatience is clouding your ability to listen? This is the power of context. It transforms confrontation into collaboration. It shifts the battlefield from a contest of wills to a shared problem-solving space. Or consider a personal relationship fractured by misunderstanding. Words have been exchanged, wounds inflicted. The urge to defend, to counterattack, is strong. Yet beneath the surface lies a web of fears, past disappointments, and unspoken needs. To engage without understanding this context is to throw gasoline on embers. Instead, pause. Seek to understand first, not merely the words, but the emotions and histories they carry. This is not weakness, it is strategic strength. It is the foundation upon which true reconciliation can be built. Even within yourself, conflict simmers. The internal voices of doubt, fear, ambition, and regret clash in silent battle. If you fail to understand these internal contexts, your motivations, your emotional triggers, your cognitive biases, you become a prisoner to your own impulses. Know yourself, Sun Tzu advises. The battlefield within is as critical as the one without. Mastery requires attention to both. So, before you step into any conflict, ask yourself, What is the terrain? What is the context? What forces shape this moment beyond the obvious? Because you don't just fight what stands before you. You fight the unseen conditions that give rise to conflict. This is why context matters. It is the foundation beneath every decision, every action, every word spoken or withheld. It is the difference between chaos and control, between defeat and victory. Never enter a dispute without full awareness. Always seek the background before you engage. Only then can you navigate the complexities of conflict with clarity and purpose. The terrain is complex. It is layered, shifting, and often hidden. But it is knowable. And when you know it, you hold the keys to resolution. Remember this. Victory is reserved for those who are willing to pay its price. The first price is understanding. The terrain is your price of admission. You stand at the edge now. The conflict awaits. The question is simple. Will you charge blindly, or will you prepare with knowledge? Know the context. Because if you don't, you are not just risking defeat. You are surrendering the chance to win before the battle begins. Know the context. This is not a mere suggestion. It is the foundation upon which all successful conflict navigation is built. Without it, you are adrift, a ship without compass or stars to guide your course. Imagine the terrain of conflict as a vast landscape, not just physical, but cultural, emotional, and situational. You must see it in its totality. To master this terrain, you need to grasp the factors that shape every conflict's unique form. Cultural norms, for example, act like invisible walls and pathways. They dictate what is acceptable, what is taboo, how respect is shown, and how power is wielded. Misreading these can turn a simple misunderstanding into an entrenched battle. Situational factors add a layer of complexity. The timing of an event, the stakes involved, recent histories, all influence how a conflict unfolds. An argument in the heat of the moment looks very different from one that emerges after months of simmering tension. Emotional context is often the most elusive yet powerful force. Emotions are not just reactions. They are the fuel of conflict. Fear, pride, resentment, hope. These currents run beneath the surface, shaping decisions and reactions in ways that logic alone cannot explain. Consider a workplace dispute. Two colleagues clash over a project deadline. On the surface, it seems a simple disagreement about priorities. But peel back the layers. One may feel undervalued, another threatened by change. Cultural expectations about hierarchy may make direct communication difficult. Without understanding these underlying factors, attempts to resolve the dispute will only scratch the surface. This is why mastering the terrain means more than gathering facts. It means perceiving the subtle signals that hint at deeper realities. Cultivating this awareness requires attentiveness and empathy. It requires you to listen not just to words, but to what lies between them. When you think about conflict, do you see it as a static event? If so, you miss the essential truth. Context is dynamic. It shifts with every word spoken, every gesture made, every silence held. To navigate it, you must be equally fluid, observant, adaptive, and patient. Misreading context is costly. It leads to misunderstandings that escalate tensions. It blinds you to opportunities for resolution. When you fail to grasp the emotional climate, you risk inflaming fears rather than easing them. Look at history for proof. Countless conflicts have spiraled because leaders failed to appreciate the cultural or situational context. They acted on assumptions, on incomplete information, or on rigid frameworks that ignored the realities on the ground. But when leaders succeed, it is because they master the terrain. They understand that every conflict is embedded in a matrix of influences. They adjust their approach accordingly, choosing timing, tone, and tactics that resonate with the context. The lesson is clear. Context is not background noise. It is the very signal you must decode to act wisely. You don't just face an opponent, you face a system. A system of relationships, histories, emotions, and environmental pressures. To navigate this system, you must deepen your situational awareness. This doesn't mean you act cautiously out of fear or indecision. It means you act strategically, with full knowledge of the forces at play. You align your actions with the terrain rather than against it. Consider the words of a modern strategist. The battlefield is not a place. It is a moment in time shaped by countless factors unseen. To succeed, you must become a student of these factors. Ask yourself, What cultural currents influence this conflict? What recent events have shaped the parties involved? What emotional undercurrents are flowing beneath the surface? What power dynamics are at work? Answering these questions is no small task. It demands humility and a willingness to look beyond your own perspective. It requires you to suspend judgment and listen deeply. This practice transforms your approach. You move from reaction to understanding, from impulsive confrontation to calculated engagement. Imagine a negotiation where you recognize the cultural importance of saving face for the other party. You adjust your language, tone, and timing to respect this. Suddenly, barriers dissolve. Cooperation becomes possible. Or a family dispute where you sense that past wounds drive the conflict. You acknowledge these without blame, creating space for healing rather than escalation. In each case, mastering the terrain means seeing the full picture. It means recognizing that conflict is not a simple problem to be solved, but a complex system to be navigated. You don't conquer context, you engage with it. Like a skilled pilot who reads shifting weather patterns and adjusts the course accordingly. This kind of mastery is rare because it requires constant vigilance. The terrain changes. The signals evolve. You must remain alert and flexible. Yet, it is the only way to move beyond surface conflict to genuine resolution. Consider the cost of ignoring context. You risk missteps that deepen divides. You squander chances to build bridges. You alienate allies and strengthen adversaries. But when you commit to understanding context, you position yourself not just as a participant, but as a strategist, one who shapes the battlefield rather than being shaped by it. This is your advantage. This is your power. Remember, every conflict is a story told by its context. Learn to read that story well, and you hold the pen to write the next chapter. Because if you don't know the terrain, you are not navigating a battlefield, you are wandering a maze. Never enter a dispute without this awareness. Master the elements that form the context, the cultural, the situational, the emotional. Only then can you move with purpose and precision. The terrain shapes the outcome. Master it, and you master the conflict. The masters of strategy, those legendary figures etched into the annals of history, understood this truth with unwavering clarity. Context is the axis upon which the entire conflict pivots. They did not stumble into battle with blind ambition or reckless courage. Instead, they dissected every element surrounding their engagement: timing, morale, environment, and beyond. Sun Tzu, centuries ago, illuminated this path with his timeless wisdom. All warfare is based on deception, he said, but deception without context is futile. To deceive effectively, you must first understand the terrain, the disposition of the enemy, and the spirit of your own forces. The battlefield is a living organism, ever-changing, and only those who read its signs with precision can hope to dominate it. This principle extends far beyond ancient warfare. It applies equally to modern arenas, boardrooms, diplomatic tables, social movements, and personal confrontations. The success or failure of any conflict strategy hinges on how deeply you grasp the nuances of context. Think of timing. A strategy launched too soon or too late can collapse, no matter how brilliant it seems on paper. The masters knew this. Eisenhower, before the D-Day invasion, did not rush. He waited for the perfect convergence of weather, intelligence, and morale. The stakes were monumental. One misstep could doom the entire Allied effort. But his patience was strategic, born of a profound understanding of context. He aligned his actions with the readiness of his troops and the vulnerabilities of the enemy. The result, a decisive turning point in history. Morale, too, is a battlefield in its own right. No force marches to victory if its spirit is broken. The masters recognize that morale is shaped by context. The story soldiers tell themselves, the trust they place in leadership, the clarity of their mission. They nurtured this intangible force, knowing that it could tip the scales even before weapons were drawn. Environment, the physical and psychological landscape, cannot be ignored. The masters studied it meticulously. Mountains, rivers, weather patterns, and urban terrain all influence their plans. But beyond geography, the environment includes the psychological climate. Is the opposition fearful or confident? Is your own side unified or fractured? These factors dictate strategy as much as any map. Aligning your approach with these contextual nuances is not optional, it is essential. When you understand the rhythm of the conflict environment, you can anticipate moves, exploit weaknesses, and minimize risks. Consider the failure of those who ignore context. They rely on rigid plans, fixed assumptions, or brute force. Their strategies falter because they clash with realities they failed to perceive. They become like generals fighting the ghost of yesterday's war rather than today's battle. The masters teach us that flexibility grounded in context is the key to success. They advise constant reassessment, adapting tactics as the terrain shifts. This mindset transforms conflict from a matter of chance into a matter of skill. You must be shapeless, like water, Sun Tzu counsels. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. If you put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. If you put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. This metaphor captures the essence of contextual mastery. You are not a fixed force, but a dynamic one. You bend without breaking. You flow into the contours of the situation, finding paths where none seem to exist. Your approach must be informed by a comprehensive analysis. This means assessing all aspects: the timing of engagement, the morale of all involved, the physical and psychological environment, and the cultural and social dynamics at play. Only then can you synchronize your moves with the moment's demands. This requires humility and discipline. You must resist the urge to charge ahead with preconceived notions or unchecked emotions. Instead, cultivate a mindset of inquiry. Seek to know every element that shapes your conflict's landscape. The masters understood that knowledge of context is not a one-time achievement, but a continuous process. As conditions evolve, so must your understanding. This strategic awareness arms you with foresight. It allows you to anticipate opposition, to prepare contingencies, and to seize fleeting opportunities. Moreover, it empowers you to align your team or allies behind a coherent vision rooted in reality. Unity, forged in the crucible of shared understanding, becomes a force multiplier. Reflect on Eisenhower's leadership once more. His success at Normandy was not just the product of military might, but of strategic patience and contextual insight. He balanced pressure from political leaders, the morale of troops, weather forecasts, and enemy movements. His decisions were not impulsive but measured, responsive to a complex web of factors. This example underscores a critical lesson. Your strategy's strength is inseparable from your grasp of context. You don't simply confront conflict. You engage with a living system. Your moves must be calibrated to its rhythms and forces. When your strategy aligns with context, you command the initiative. You shape the battlefield rather than being shaped by it. When you ignore context, you cede control. You become reactive, vulnerable to surprises and setbacks. The masters teach us that victory is not random. It is the fruit of deep understanding and adaptable execution. So, before you act, ask yourself, have I accounted for timing? Have I measured morale? Have I studied the environment in all its dimensions? Have I adjusted my approach to the unique contours of this conflict? If the answer is yes, you join the ranks of strategic thinkers who do not merely fight battles, but win wars. Because if you don't, you risk becoming a cautionary tale, another commander undone not by the enemy's strength, but by their own blindness to context. Remember this. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. That opportunity reveals itself only to those who see clearly. Master the context. Align your strategy with its demands. And you will not only survive the conflict, you will shape its outcome. Context is not monolithic. It is a terrain composed of varied dimensions, each with its own features and challenges. To master it, you must first break it down. Understand its layers, its facets, its moving parts. Only then can you navigate it with precision. Begin with the environmental dimension. This is the external condition shaping the conflict's landscape. It includes physical surroundings, the literal terrain on which disputes occur. Mountains, cities, offices, or digital platforms all form the backdrop that influences how conflict unfolds. But environment goes further. It encompasses timing, resources, and external pressures. Is there a deadline looming? Are there external stakeholders watching closely? Is the conflict taking place in a public forum or a private setting? Each factor colors the possibilities and constraints you face. Next, consider the social dimension. Here lies the network of relationships, power dynamics, and social structures that underpin the conflict. Who holds influence? Who depends on whom? What alliances exist beneath the surface? Social context reveals the invisible lines of loyalty and rivalry. It highlights where trust exists and where suspicion lurks. Understanding these connections is vital because conflict rarely occurs in isolation. It is embedded in a web of human interactions. Ask yourself, who are the key players? What are their interests and motivations? How do they communicate? What histories do they share? This knowledge helps you anticipate reactions and craft approaches that resonate. Then turn inward to the internal dimension. This is the often overlooked realm of emotions, beliefs, and motivations, both yours and those of others involved. Internal context is the psychological terrain that shapes perceptions and responses. Fear, pride, anger, hope. These emotions are the invisible forces driving behavior. They can cloud judgment or fuel determination. Your own internal state can be an asset or a liability. Awareness here is crucial. Reflect. What emotions are present? How do they influence decisions? Are there cognitive biases at play? Are past experiences coloring current interpretation? By dissecting context into these three dimensions, environmental, social, and internal, you gain a multi-layered map of the terrain. But knowing these categories is not enough. You must actively assess them in every conflict situation. This means more than gathering facts. It means observing, listening, and reflecting. Practical questions guide this process. 1. Environmental. What are the external conditions? What constraints or opportunities do they present? How does this setting influence behavior? 2. Social. Who are involved? What are their roles, relationships, and power positions? How do social dynamics shape interaction? 3. Internal. What emotions and motivations are driving behavior? What assumptions or fears are influencing decisions? These questions serve as your reconnaissance drills, preparing you for engagement. Cultivate situational awareness, a state of alertness that integrates all these dimensions. It allows you to see beyond surface appearances and uncover hidden forces at work. Avoid the trap of relying solely on fixed frameworks or assumptions. Context is fluid. What holds true at one moment may shift the next. Being locked into rigid models blinds you to evolving realities. Instead, approach each conflict as a unique ecosystem. Observe carefully. Adapt constantly. For example, in a corporate dispute, the environmental dimension might include economic pressures and organizational culture. The social dimension could reveal factions within teams, alliances with leadership, or informal power brokers. The internal dimension might expose fears of job security or ambitions for promotion. Only by synthesizing this information can you craft an approach that addresses root causes rather than symptoms. Similarly, in a personal conflict, the environment might be the family setting or community norms. Social context may involve long-standing relationships and roles. Internal factors could be deeper emotional wounds or unspoken desires. Mastering context means you do not react blindly to what is visible. You probe deeper, seeking the undercurrents that truly drive conflict. This layered understanding transforms your role. You become less a combatant and more a navigator, steering through complex terrain with insight. Remember, he who knows the terrain and himself will win 100 battles without loss. This ancient wisdom calls you to mastery not just of external factors, but of inner awareness. By integrating environmental, social, and internal dimensions, you build a comprehensive situational map. This map guides your strategy, your communication, and your actions. It prepares you to face conflict not as chaos, but as a complex but knowable system. Never underestimate the power of this layered approach. It is the difference between floundering in confusion and moving with purposeful clarity. Know the terrain in all its complexity, because if you don't, you risk being blindsided by forces you failed to perceive. In every conflict, pause to assess these dimensions. Ask your questions. Observe the signals. Reflect on the emotions. This is your path to true contextual mastery. Now that you understand the layers of context, the environmental, social, and internal dimensions, how do you apply this mastery before entering conflict? The answer lies in a deliberate, step-by-step process that transforms awareness into strategic readiness. Step 1. Ask insightful questions. Do not rush. Begin with curiosity rather than judgment. Probe the situation deeply. What are the facts? What are the emotions involved? Who holds influence? What histories inform the present moment? These questions are not idle. They are your reconnaissance. They gather intelligence that shapes your approach. Without them, you act in the dark. Step 2. Suspend judgment. This may be the most difficult part. Your instincts urge you to categorize, to assign blame, to decide quickly who is right or wrong. But premature judgment narrows your vision and blinds you to nuance. Instead, hold your assumptions lightly. Let the data and observations guide you. Be open to complexity and contradiction. This openness is a strategic advantage. Step 3. Position yourself with clarity. Once you have gathered information and tempered your judgments, decide your stance. What are your objectives? What are your boundaries? How will you communicate your intentions? Clarity here does not mean rigidity. It means knowing what you stand for and how you intend to engage, while remaining adaptable to unfolding dynamics. To see this process in action, consider a historical example: Abraham Lincoln's navigation of the American Civil War. His conflict was immense, fraught with political, social, and moral complexity. Yet, Lincoln's leadership shows the power of contextual mastery. He did not rush to battle without understanding the terrain. He weighed the political climate, gauged public sentiment, and assessed the morale of Union troops. He recognized the social fissures that fueled the conflict and the internal divisions within his own government. Lincoln's famous patience was strategic. He delayed emancipation until the moment was right, aligning moral imperative with military necessity. He communicated clearly, even when his decisions were unpopular, maintaining coherence in a fractious nation. His success was not a product of raw force, but of deep contextual understanding and adaptive strategy. This example underscores a vital truth. Understanding and adapting to context is not a luxury. It is essential for resolving conflicts strategically and successfully. When you enter conflict equipped with this mastery, you do more than respond. You shape the engagement. You anticipate obstacles and opportunities. You align your actions with the larger system rather than against it. This approach prevents the common pitfalls of conflict: escalation, misunderstanding, and stalemate. It opens pathways to resolution that are sustainable and meaningful. Remember, conflict is not merely about winning or losing. It is about transformation of relationships, systems, and sometimes yourself. Contextual mastery enables you to guide this transformation with wisdom and effectiveness. So, when the next conflict beckons, do not rush in armed only with impulse or partial knowledge. Instead, pause. Ask your questions. Suspend your judgment. Position yourself with clarity. This is how you honor the complexity of conflict. This is how you claim strategic advantage. Because if you don't understand the background, your efforts will be misdirected. You will fight ghosts rather than realities. You will miss the chance to turn conflict into opportunity. Know the context. Master the terrain. Prepare yourself fully before engagement. Only then do you stand ready not just to survive conflict, but to resolve it with purpose and power.